live. Welcome, welcome. Welcome, everyone. It's the Catalyst Marketing Rant. I am your quasi-host, Mariah Kamei, residential strategist, and definitely wannabe talk show host. I am going to attempt not to butcher anybody's name or description in the next 5 seconds. It's a 50-50 shot, which I would say is pretty much the same shot that the MLB has of making it all 60 games this season.
Boom, boom. And as we learned this morning, Mariah doesn't know how to pronounce names. So I'm betting against you.
Yeah, no, hold it against me. I'm really bad at it. Robin Emiliani causes me some trouble, as we know. But I am joined. Emiliani.
There you go. It's Italian.
It's Italian. I am joined by her. She is, of course, our fearless leader and our B2B marketing maven, among many other qualities. I'm also joined by our new residential Kiwi. Would not be the same without him, Derek Ng. Hello. Who is one of our creative experts, among many other things, client whisperer. Put that on his resume as well. And then, of course, last but certainly not least, Trevor Keating. Thank you for having an easy name to pronounce. Residential expert in pretty much everything, specifically focusing on digital, of course. So welcome, welcome, welcome. We thought that today we would just kind of go look back at some of the headlines that have happened last week, get everybody's read on what's happening, and do some follow-ups to some ones that we've already had in the past. So the first thing, the most riveting thing to watch on TV last week. Okay, maybe that's an oversell. But Trevor and I did tune in, I don't know if you guys did as well, but to the AntiTrust hearings, which didn't make for terrible TV. I watched it on Twitter. I found that to be a much more pleasant experience because of the commentary that was going on in the background from the peanut gallery.
Twitter gallery.
Yeah, pretty much all the Twitter folks were having a lot of fun with it. So I think from my perspective, and I really want to get Trevor's on this, the last time these guys, Congress people, sat in front of the Zuck in particular, they kind of looked like really dumb people that didn't know how Facebook even worked. And they were almost like your grandma asking for help how to use the platform. I think this time the ladies in Congress did a pretty dang good job of holding some feet to the fire and much, much more productive for the most part, I would say. Felt like maybe the Republican representatives were a little bit more focused on why are you being mean to our dad, aka Trump, and not letting his stuff go live. But otherwise, I think the writing's on the wall. What do you think, Trevor?
What, the writing in the wall in what way?
Oh, they're getting it. The complaints are going to be filed. They're going to break them up.
I still stand that these are not, like, they're still not interpreting the law. Like, they talk about a monopoly, and none of these companies are monopolies, and like not even close to being monopolies. So that's where I struggle. I'm like, at its core, I mean, the antitrust portion of like buying companies that are competitive to you, again, if you want to go through every single industry that exists, you're going to have a lot of that happen. I mean, whether it's huge department stores, or the one thing that they really hate about Amazon is Amazon creating products in likeness of products that are on their site, which is the very premise of every grocery store. It has a private selection category that competes with the name brand. And it's your responsibility to create a name brand that says, I want Heinz ketchup, not Kroger brand ketchup. I don't think they're going to win. Like, you'd have to tear down so many other things if they went forward with that, in my opinion.
So super interesting. And you're right, like the antitrust laws that came about in the 80s were not, obviously, of course, designed necessarily for this. Just to recap on what the big four, Google, Apple, Amazon, and Facebook stand accused of is stifling competition, exerting market power, questionable use of data, and then also their employees have been accused of questionable practices around misuse of seller data or influencing company policy to bias algorithms. So the question is, if you are purposefully taking down your competition, maybe that's not necessarily falls into the monopolistic category, but does it fall into an antitrust category?
Sounds like capitalism, isn't it?
It is capitalism. I also think that I agree that some people had smart opinions out of the gate on the topics, but when it came to the actual debate, they had zero facts to support what they were trying to say. And so every time it would come to Google took down my page and therefore I don't rank number 1 on Google anymore, and this is because you guys hate me. It's like, no. Ask any agency that exists on this world and we'd have a different opinion that says, well, you probably broke your website in some way. The algorithm said that this is no longer quality and removed you. Google did not handpick you and say, this competes with us, so therefore we're removing it. Google just follows its best practices to a T, so competing against Google at its game is tough, but anybody can compete. You can outrank Google very easily.
Well, I think that's
Amazon does it every day. They really do. I mean, if you want a perfect example, it's Amazon has more domain authority than Google does on its own website.
Well, I think that brings up like so many interesting debates. Like, for starters, absolutely. I think that is where they are going to catch Google. Is like Google controls both the buy and the sell side of the ad market. They make up the rules to their own game, and they can change the rules whenever they want. Is that fair? And doesn't that stifle capitalism if nobody else can compete?
I think if they change the rules of the game in a way that would actually inhibit user experience, they would lose. People would jump ship. And so that's their argument, is like the changes to the game are technological changes. It's like for a long time we punished you for having JavaScript that would preload on your site because computers weren't fast enough and the internet wasn't fast enough to keep up with JavaScript, especially on mobile devices. Now you can load your entire website in JavaScript and we don't care. That's kind of what they went back. We don't care if you have they used to say we want pagination. We want you to have multiple pages. We recommend 10 components on a single page. Now they actually prefer having a really, 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 really long page. That's because technology has changed and that user experience is inherently better when technology can keep up with it. So, I mean, yeah, they've changed, but I don't think to me, it's always been for growth, not for creating like a worse experience. They've taken out bits of content. They have like all of these things are to inform things like chatbots and a Google Home or any of those things. It's all part of the future and what they're looking at, and not looking at, okay, you used to do a really great job of keyword stuffing, which has always been a black hat SEO tactic anyways. We never really wanted to reward you, but our algorithm would accidentally reward people for doing keyword stuffing. Now they don't. Now they will punish you. So your site might have gotten removed because you just packed it with keywords that were junk and the content actually sucked.
What I find super interesting about this whole thing is, why try them all at once? Why is this happening as a conglomeration versus let's go after the Zuck? Let's go after each of these companies individually. Like, do they have a better case by trying them all at the same time?
That's a really interesting question. Certainly they're going to go after, I think they're going to go after Google first, and they are going to go after them individualistically. But I wonder if there isn't a benefit from a public perspective of having it have the weight of like, no, there are 4 companies doing this, not just one, right? Like it's the sheer volume. Like, does it give you momentum to try them
right?
All at once?
Like I think it's a clever move on their part. I mean, it's unprecedented. I have never heard of this, where they've tried all these companies at one time. It just seems like it's going to be biased as a result.
I think they want it to be a modern day, like big oil railroad, like like they're going to take down Rockefeller. And I'm like, you guys don't even understand the internet enough to know that these are it's the equivalent of oil versus the railroad. You're talking about e-commerce versus search versus social media versus, I don't even know why Apple's at the table, honestly, but they're apparently there. Like, I think that's what I think they literally just picked the four biggest, and they're like, we'll just add Apple because everybody likes Apple and we want to make a headline. Like, it was the poorest excuse of due process, in my opinion. I'm like, this is like, anytime they would try to defend themselves, they're like, well, excuse me, I don't have enough time for you to talk, but I appreciate your opinion. It's like, no, you don't.
I mean, I think that's what's so fascinating about these things is like, because you and I both watched it. We both had a very different take on how it went. Because I was like, yeah, like these guys are like, why would we reward these guys? Why wouldn't we make them squirm a little bit publicly on TV or something like the TV? I think, though, Trevor, you do hit a really, really interesting point because antitrust always comes back to the consumer, right? Have you impacted the consumer experience in a negative way? And I think that's a really interesting question. Like, I think about what we've talked about in the past around algorithms and inciting violence and or just bias because you're not seeing any other types of information. Does that hurt the consumer unwittingly, right?
From what I understand, though, that a lot of those like Facebook and everything, they look at what you've looked at previously and then kind of serve you stuff and content that is based on your opinions. So whether it's biased or not, it's kind of based on your previous viewing habits. So I don't know if it's biased or just kind of serving to the person's needs, to be fair.
I think that's the problem. I think most people like hearing news that's favorable to their opinion anyways. So when you're sitting there liking a whole bunch of posts that favor that, an algorithm that's built to find things that you're going to like and want to read and click on, it's not them doing it as much as it's you doing it to yourself. You don't have an open mind. You're not open-minded enough to value the other side and like the other side of the opinion. So it's going to go in one direction. I don't know.
Okay, well, here's another way to posit it. Do you trust Facebook and Google? I mean, you probably are doing it every day, but like when you fundamentally get down to it, we're trusting these guys with a lot of our information.
But it's not just them.
Agree with that without any regulation?
But I look at the things that aren't regulated. It's things like school websites and portals and, me signing up my kids for their next school year, which may never happen. I just feel like there's so many things that aren't secure that, to me, it feels like those are safer environments than something like the school registration site, personally.
I agree. I mean, as far as like giving my credit card information, but you don't even have to pay for most of those sites anyways, except for Amazon. So it's like, yeah, I mean, their security they're the smartest people that have the highest encryption of any company that exists. And you're going to go give your credit card information to these nobody companies or even anything to do with the government. I'm like, I don't even know because some of them are so far behind the times. It's insane.
There was a case a couple of months ago where someone had like a whole bunch of evidence on an Apple phone and the government couldn't crack it. And they actually had to go back to Apple and say, can you open this up?
Yes.
No.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So even the government can't even crack the encryption on Apple stuff. So I don't know. I feel a little bit more secure with those kind of things. But there are certain things that I'd probably say, well, don't they deserve just as much, but they just don't have the resource. Like schools.
Yeah. I think as far as the antitrust portion is concerned, I think they're going to struggle. For one, grouping them together to me is a mistake, not a good thing. I think they're wildly different companies, which made the topic just jump and jump and jump. I mean, if you think about, they really picked on Facebook buying Instagram as being this like really negative thing. And it's so easy for Facebook to come to the table and be like, look at what Instagram was when we purchased it. Look at how it was a collaborative effort. It was something that we wanted to do. Whether you see behind the doors of how people are a little bit, they speak differently than they do when they're knowing that it's going to be public. They have some emails that weren't very good, I guess, that talk about how, yes, we're going to take over the world kind of thing. And I'm like, when has somebody not kind of said, yes, this is going to be the best thing ever, we're going to buy Instagram and take over the world? It's like, yeah, that's what you want. That's what all of us want.
Exactly.
So I don't know. I think as far as did you add value to the user, I think you added endless amount of value. I think they created an ad experience for one that was terrible on Instagram previously. They created a user experience that you can kind of cross promote the two platforms. People use Instagram much better now. They introduced stories. They introduced all these like very new things that were not a portion of Instagram before. I mean, I want to pull up, all they have to do is literally pull up the user experience before they purchased them and pull up the user experience now and be like, what's the discussion here? How is the user not benefiting?
How much of this though is like down to the consumer, like their choice, whether they use Facebook or not, and whether they hook up their Instagram or not? I mean, at the end of the day, I know that Facebook numbers were dropping. I don't know if that was true or not, but it's been in the news for a while. They've got other platforms that they're competing with, like TikTok and everything like that. So I don't know. It seems like there's a lot of choice still there, like whether I buy an Apple phone or a Samsung, or things like that. I moved from Apple phones because I just couldn't handle the battery life or the lack of battery life, and so I went to Samsung. I know that was a mistake. But there's still an element of choice for those four. You don't have to be on Facebook. You don't have to be on Instagram. You don't have to use an Apple phone.
Oh my God.
I would debate that. I mean, like, can you? I don't know. Like, that's such a great question to ask, Derek. Like, do you actually have a choice?
I can use
Can you live without, but without all four? Could you live without Google, without Amazon, without Facebook, without Apple?
I know people who do that. They don't. Well, they use Bing, so they do use a search engine. They don't use Ask Jeeves anymore. But yeah, I mean, I think that they don't buy off Amazon. They go to the store. They have an old cell phone, like a flip cell phone, like a Nokia, and then they don't use Facebook. So they've made a conscious choice not to use any of it.
I think that's the problem with trying them all together is they are not one company. And so it doesn't matter if you use one of them, or if you use all of them, or it doesn't matter. Like, they aren't one company. They're four different things. So the fact that four of them, that's like saying Kroger has a monopoly. I mean, yes, I go to King Soopers and Kroger touches a whole lot of different elements of people's lives. And like, there's huge companies that exist in other areas of our lives that I just don't think it's fair. If you picked out four of the large, like, that'd be, let's take Publix, let's take Kroger, let's take like the four biggest grocery brands and be like, oh, they have a monopoly on the industry. It's like, no, they don't. That's the whole point, is they do not. Just because you have to touch one of the four usually does not mean they have a monopoly.
Yeah, and I don't think it goes back to monopoly, really. I think it goes back to whether they're harmful or not.
Well, they talk a lot about the monopoly.
And to the market, to capitalism. Are they, the fundamental questions to me are they fundamentally dangerous to capitalism? Yes, I think so. Are they fundamentally dangerous to the consumer? Hell yeah, they're fundamentally dangerous to the consumer.
I don't know. I don't agree.
That's a tough one. Because basically what you're saying is
articulate the danger, right?
Well, I mean, but like, there have been companies that have gone up and down. There have been banks that have gone up and down, and they think, oh, this is going to be a monopoly. There's been telecoms that have done that as well. But I don't know whether, like, in a capitalistic society that is America, you kind of go, well, you can be successful, but you can't be too successful. So. Well,
I think that's always going to be the challenge, because if you're too successful in America, do you not run America? And weren't we supposed to be a democracy?
Well, I mean, but then, like, where's the tempering of capitalism in there? Where do you say, okay, you can have capitalism, where you you can start from scratch, Jeff Bezos started in his garage, and be like the number one. So how do you go, okay, you can be number one, but you can't be too number one?
Yeah, that's what I think the biggest struggle is. I also think that a lot of them, to their point, it's like the companies that are the top 10 companies in the world were not even a ranking factor 10 years ago. So who knows what's going to happen in the next, it's so like unprogressive to look backwards and be like, there's no way we're going to move forward from this. And this is going to be the new thing for the next 100 and something years. It's like, no, somebody else will emerge. Or Amazon's biggest fear, in my opinion, should be all of these companies that now can just take their shopping experience online. We know that everybody wants it to be online anyways, so they can go create their own shopping experience separate from Amazon that's recurring, and you don't have to deal with Amazon. You don't have to do any of that stuff. A lot of people are trying to get it back onto their own site, and because Amazon does punish them. But people love brands, so they go and find the brand they like, then they just start buying directly from them on their e-commerce site instead of going to Amazon. I don't know. It incentivizes a lot of the companies. All the advertising should go to their own website, not to Amazon anyways, so they make a higher margin.
Oh yeah. Like I just know, like, and even from a marketing perspective, I feel like trying to market a product on Amazon is a nightmare. I mean, I guess one could argue it helps us have jobs, because there's literally, you have to hire an expert in order to do it. One would wager the exact same thing for Facebook and Google, right? That's why there's SEO companies. So there are little alternatives to that, I don't know, control that they have over everything. I don't know if I like how much control they have.
At the end of the day, though, I mean, isn't it your choice to choose if they have control? Like,
Well,
you don't have to go to Amazon.
the question is it? If you're going to sell something online, I think that's a really great fundamental question. How successfully can you do it without an Amazon? If you're going to make an app, how successfully can you market that app without Apple?
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to sell a product, or just try to interface with your consumers, how successfully can you do that without Facebook and Instagram?
Well, I mean, Trevor, I don't know, if you were starting a business from scratch selling, I don't know, candles, because I know that you love them. Do you think you could actually, like, from a digital perspective, you can hire an expert and actually create a website and do the search engine that would actually be at least competitive, or at least put you on the map?
Yeah, I think you could. I think, all of my strategies would touch one of those 4 companies if I was going that route, and I don't think it's a bad thing. I think a good strategy would touch all 4 of them, except for Apple, because, if it's candles, they don't really have a huge role in that. I don't know. I think but then there's a different strategy that says, okay, screw it. My sole purpose is I want to get into Walmart. Walmart is twice as large as all of those companies, or what did they say, 4 times as large as Amazon or something. Walmart would be a much bigger win than getting into Amazon and trying to sell it on yourself. I don't know. I think there's other options. I think the creativity is very limited right now because we're all digital minded, especially with the whole pandemic and things like that. But there are options for sure.
I think, just to be clear, I think Amazon is worth, at least twice as much as Walmart.
Are we sure?
The valuation.
We'll fact check it.
We'll fact check that later. Got to keep ourselves honest. Well, I think, all right, so really wanted to win this debate this time, because I didn't last time, but I think that this is highlighting just how complicated of an issue it is, because there's no cut and dry, clear, they're bad guys, they're good guys. Everybody seems to be very willing to still drink the Kool-Aid, at least over here. So I think we'll call it a draw, maybe? Or, I could say probably I lost that one yet again, even though I still think they should break them up. Break them up.
Well,
I convince you guys.
Just on one thing on that, because New Zealand doesn't have, and it's not because we're backwards. It doesn't have Amazon, so that's why I actually come from there. Like we've never had Amazon. You have to get shipped over from Australia if you want to buy it. So we self-contained, and we just don't really care if Amazon's there. So that's why I kind of think there are still choices.
Up to your choice, yeah.
This is my fact checking.
What are the dates on this? Are you looking at revenue? Look at market cap. I would base it on market cap myself. But.
I just did a Google search. I know we're not allowed to use Google. Largest company in the world. Walmart. What's the top 10 largest? Walmart, 482 billion. Like everything says Walmart.
Walmart.
Yeah.
I think if you do the valuation of the companies or market cap, Amazon's more. So we both win. That's what that means. Like, no.
That's not capitalism.
Well, we know Amazon's not trying to be profitable. All right. Well, the clock runs out on TikTok is another headline that we are following closely. Microsoft, noticeably absent, although they are quite a big company, from the antitrust hearings. Now, they have been under the gun in the past, back in the 90s for antitrust. And Microsoft has been very, very focused on more of their business-to-business market. So therefore may have avoided the whole thing because they don't really have a lot of consumer complaints or opportunities. That is, unless they purchase TicTac. So what do you guys think? Is Microsoft going to buy?
I don't think they're going to do it. I think this whole exposure to Apple, Google, Facebook, and Amazon, I just think it's going to deter them from doing anything. I think, if anything, they're going to see how this plays out. And if this has a significant impact, they'll pull back. But I can't imagine that. I mean, this is part of the reason why Microsoft is doing so well. To your point about focusing on business, that why would they muck things up by going after consumers like this?
That's interesting. I do think they would, actually, because they haven't had a social media presence in the last probably 10 years, or like something in that kind of B2C realm. Obviously they have, their Microsoft Word and everything, but other than that, I can't see anything that they've done. So a ready-made brand that they come in as a savior and they purchase. I don't know. It's I would almost think that's not a bad move. If they came in.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's not a bad move, but I do think it's interesting. I'm reading this book called Playing to Win. I don't know if you guys have ever read that, but one of the things that it talks about is entering a new space for your business with an acquisition. 99% of the time does not work. It's a costly endeavor, and if you've never done it before, to go ahead and assume that role by acquiring another company often doesn't work out well. So
that's it. I don't know that they have the know-how for it. It's not a completely unrelated type of platform for them. It might get burdened in red tape, possibly.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it was totally out of their wheelhouse.
Wow, it's super. I mean, I feel like Satya just maybe wants to be in the spotlight more. I don't know. But it is interesting because I kind of consider Microsoft like a sleeper. Like they do so well. They manage to fly fairly under the radar. They're fairly benign in terms of brands. So would something like this muck all that up for them?
Yeah, I mean, why aren't they sitting at that table with the other four? Because I think back to your market evaluation, I think they're one. Oh yeah,
they're in the $1 trillion boat for sure.
But to your point, Mariah, I think though they are, they're the more subtle capitalists. So for example, the fact that, we're seeing lots of articles lately about how they're overtaking Salesforce. I mean, they have stealthily come in and they're starting to do that. So I think them, as opposed to being egotistical and gregarious and being very public and forthcoming about their intentions, like maybe this whole, like, we're going to keep capturing market share until we are the giant. So
they're the chess players of the tech companies. They do quite measured moves.
Yeah.
So I can see. I mean, this one was a little bit out of the blue, admittedly. But when you kind of think about it, for me, it's not a big, giant leap. They don't have a social media platform. They don't have any kind of B2C outstanding products. They could have been a games giant, but Xbox is still competing with PS5. So they still kind of have issues when it comes to hitting that B2C space.
Yeah. I mean, the new Xbox is supposed to be insanely powerful compared to like what previous consoles were. Like it competes with finally like a PC level, which is interesting. But yeah, no, I agree. I think that's really like their only primary B2C on the entertainment side.
They should have destroyed PS. Like when I was working on PlayStation when it came out, and they should have destroyed it because of the amount of money they put in. But PlayStation still holds, I think over Xbox more market share, ever so slightly.
I think that might be true. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but the amount of money they put in when they first released it, they should have absolutely destroyed the market.
Well, there you go. So no conclusion there either. 50-50. It's a 50-50 split on everything today. Or maybe the last one was like 25-70.
Okay, I'll throw it out there. Should this move be made by the government? Should they be forcing a technology company that's owned overseas to have to be under US control?
Absolutely.
Yes?
Yes, in large part because anybody can download it. My teenage kids can download this and have. So it's on their phones and sucking their data. Until there's some sort of regulation like that, like we have to shut this down.
Yeah,
it's stealing.
They need to come up with a GDPR for the US that is associated. I mean, just come up with an app standard that says if you're going to operate in the US, you're going to allow this on the US app network, you have to abide by these standards the same way the GDPR exists to kind of prevent that from happening in their region.
All right.
This is interesting. I mean, yes, I agree. I think it probably makes the most sense for America to have forced that hand for sure. But I think it's interesting that we're saying TicTac is a threat and we should regulate them because we don't want maybe China to have our data. Is that part of it?
Well, I think it's the lack of regulation. So I think it's the fact
around the data.
Yeah, it's the fact that the government of China can go in at any point in time and take that data away from that company. And now the Chinese government has access to every single US phone that has TicTac on it. That's the scare, because our government has no control over clearly what happens to these 4 companies. So that's like the difference is like what Derek's describing. It's like, even if a government wants to get into an Apple device, Apple says no. You're not allowed in to access that goes against our privacy policies, where when you're in a communist society, it doesn't really matter. What the government says goes. So if one day they change their mind and want access, or if they've already changed their mind, we don't know.
So just to be clear, like if Canada, it doesn't apply to things like Canada. It's just any kind of communist run or where data is accessible by the government.
I mean, I don't know. I think it's less about that and more that it needs to be known. I mean, and if it needs to happen in the US or a different kind of place, but it should be on some kind of private server that is not accessible by an entity that's not part of like the one that you're abiding to. You're saying TikTok can have this information and this data, and that's what I'm giving my rights to. The second they say, okay, well, thank you, and we're going to give this to all these other people, and there's no regulation around that, I think that's the problem. It doesn't matter whether it's a government or they go and hand it to the next app company or the next app that comes out, and they just want to have a competitive advantage, so they sell all of that data away. That technically goes against what we allow in the US, because that transfer of data is illegal.
Okay. And how do we feel about the TikTok users? There's been a lot of crying memes about the millennials not having TikTok anymore. How does everyone feel about that?
They'll get over it.
Yeah, what's the new one that's emerging? Triller or something like that?
Gosh.
I guess they've been around for 5 years already, which I didn't know.
That's the first time I've ever heard of that. That's how.
Really? Yeah. What's the name of it, Trevor? Do you know?
No, that was the first time I've ever heard of it.
Robin's
Talk
leading.
amongst yourself. I'll pull it up.
I'm expecting Vine to come back for the third time.
Yes, Triller versus TikTok. Here it is.
Why did Vine die? And because I kind of think, isn't it exactly the same as?
I mean, I think it is. It's very similar. I think what TikTok did well was make it solely for a mobile device. They took up the entire screen. So it's like, you just feel immersed in the experience, where even on like Instagram, that's why I think stories do so well, is because it's the whole screen. Like, you just like to use all of that. I mean, people stop using
All the real estate.
Yeah. I mean, when you have like the post section, it's just a little bit more like, it's not as fun. It doesn't feel like an experience. It feels like just another post.
It might have just been before their time a little bit. And often, right, the first to market isn't the one that succeeds in the market, because they don't know. It's easy to come in as the second player and win.
There's TikTok.
So everybody's homework tonight is to look up Triller, Triller, because apparently a lot of influencers have moved to this particular platform. Interestingly enough, they're not a public company. So we'll see. They need a marketing agency. We can help them.
Exactly. We like those private companies. Oh, well, I thoroughly enjoy these philosophical debates, especially when it comes back down to data. And it sounds like we're all way more comfortable, which isn't necessarily surprising, with Jeff Bezos having our data or Mark Zuckerberg having our data, even though as I say that, I'm like, what am I? Versus the Republic of China.
I gave Sundar a vial of my blood like years ago.
Well, he's a little bit more trustworthy, obviously.
Just a vial? Just one single vial, Trevor?
And then there was a week that I was like under, I don't know what happened. There was like implants or something, but yeah, not here. Sign me up. You can replace my eyeballs if you're going to create like augmented reality. I'll be first on the list.
I love it. Alrighty, guys. Well, I don't know. Is there anything else we want to cover from headlines perspective?
Can I throw one last one out there?
Yeah.
What does everyone think of Quibi? Since we're using these strange words.
Quibi's DOA.
Well, I don't know. I've been seeing a lot of advertising for Quibi. They've got their new Fugitive series coming out. Keith Sutherland spearheading that. So yeah, if anyone who doesn't know Quibi out there, their new kind of basically Netflix but with original content, and only I think a lot of people debate on whether they made the right move, whether it was only to be seen on your mobile phone. You couldn't cast it, you couldn't download it. I think you still couldn't download it, but it was supposed to be 10-minute or less segments of content that you could look, as you're in a queue or in the bathroom or anything like that. Digestible, apparently. So I know that there's been some headlines about how they were aiming for that, and then the pandemic hit, and obviously put a lot of they curtailed a lot of their success from there. But I don't know if anyone has any thoughts about whether Quibi, they've put something ridiculous like amounts of money into it, whether that is still a viable platform even with a post-pandemic.
I don't think so. I think that there are plenty of other alternative options out there that are too similar.
With original.
Yeah, original content. I think it's going to be an uphill battle for them.
I think that they are before their time. I think that a lot of these disruptors struggle at the beginning. I mean, not that Snapchat's a success story, but Instagram is a success story of like, everyone's like, I don't know. I don't know. I felt like both of those people were very reluctant to buy into at the beginning. It was just a different experience altogether. We weren't ready for something like of that sort. I don't know. Back to the big regulation stuff. It's like, who's to say that Netflix doesn't have pseudo monopoly when it comes to some of that? And then who's the biggest other one? It's like Amazon again. And then you have Hulu. It's like, well, I don't know. I could see it being parsed down to smaller content and that being a cool thing and a cool experience just to get a quick little win. I think they'll probably have to collaborate or come up with some kind of enhancement on it. But out of the gate, it's not a bad premise.
They certainly spent some money on it.
I don't know why they spent so much money on it, because I think most of these quality ones, they come out in a much more organic fashion. I mean, in Netflix, I think is the best example of meeting in the middle of not just being a huge disruptor, but like making it so easy they had this end goal in mind. Uber is probably a good example too, but like Netflix started with DVDs and it was get a mailed DVD, and then they switched over the platform and like got you hooked. And then that was their vision from the get-go. I mean, maybe not the way they see it now, but I mean, a little bit of that. I just think that is, how do you get somebody to, if you're going to disrupt the space so much, how do you kind of weed them in a little bit more?
A friend of mine and I looked at the share price for Netflix, and like I think it was 97, 98 or something like that, maybe a little bit later, like when it was like 13 cents or something per share. And we just saw the rise of it over the past 20 years.
Yeah.
Those things now, and we were just kicking ourselves going, why didn't we buy into that when they were like a fledgling company? Obviously, you say that a lot about Apple and all that kind of stuff as well, but interesting, especially trends, seeing how like they've moved from that model of the DVDs in the post box to streaming, and everyone was like, no, this is never going to work. The internet's not going to catch up. It caught up within a couple of years, and now everyone has it on the TV.
I mean, you probably don't even realize this, but most people that have a Netflix account, you can technically still get DVDs mailed to your house. Like, it's part of your program. But yeah,
Really?
No one does it.
That's hilarious.
And that's the beauty of it.
Do it.
They co-packaged it. Like, they just said, okay, you'll get the subscription and you can get 2 DVDs a week or month or whatever it was. And it was like, everybody's like, oh yeah, what do I need the subscription for? I just need the DVDs. Let's go. And now it's like, you don't even realize you have access to the DVDs. They've kept the same model.
How do you get the DVDs?
I don't even know.
Do you even have a DVD player, Derek?
I
think it's Blu-ray now, at least. But
okay, fair enough too.
Alrighty. Well, I think the last word. What's the last word on this one? It's complicated. You're screwed anyway. Either the government or companies are going to have your data. The consumer experience sucks no matter what.
Yeah.
Or does it? I feel like it's not bad. I like when it's like, hey, here's recommended things that you might like. Like, that makes, I don't know. I disagree. I think it's like more, I love the idea of giving the data to people that are going to use it responsibly, but that responsibility is the biggest question.
Yeah. I think, can you trust them to use it responsibly? Because I think we all do like the convenience. We're clearly willing to trade our souls for convenience. Clearly.
I think that there's a lot of conspiracy theorists in our brains that we think that these people care more about us than they do. But
well, they don't care about us at all.
Well, in the sense that like they care about what you're browsing or what you're looking at or what you're buying. They don't care at all. I think they do care about creating a better user experience, because better user experience makes more customers, more people addicted, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, but they want better crack on the market.
Yeah, the fear of somebody being afraid that they see what you see, nobody's looking.
Nobody cares what you're buying on Amazon.
Nobody.
Nobody. So maybe your mom. Oh. Alrighty, guys. Well, until next time.